Hey guys, welcome back to Faith in an Anxious World, Part 3. Today we're going to be looking at two stories that are happening simultaneously in the life of Jesus. And both of these situations are people that are on the brink, people that are on the edge. They're having some of the worst times, days, even years of their lives, and it's happening as Jesus is moving from one place to another. He's in a hurry. He's busy. And so everything that's happening around him is pushing him and pulling him. But in this story, we see that Jesus stops. That's one of the hardest things with anxiety, is because in an anxious world, it's hard for us to stop, to actually take inventory of what's going on around us, to think about what's making us feel the way we feel, to actually breathe, to think about reaching out to someone who could help us, and then following through by telling them what's really going on in our lives. So in this story, we find Jesus in Luke 8 working with two hopeless situations. In Luke 8:40 going all the way through verse 56, we see Jesus being approached by a man whose daughter is dying. And he says, "I will go with you." And he starts to move with a crowd to get to this man's house. And on the way, Jesus stops in the middle and says, "Who touched me?" And the disciples are looking at him and they're saying, "What do you mean, who touched you? This is a huge crowd. Why would you stop in the middle of going somewhere to do a good thing to say, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus is serious, and he looks around and he's asking the crowd, and finally a woman comes forward. We find out that this woman has been bleeding for a long time, 12 years of her life, and she spent all of her life savings, everything she has, on doctors and medical professionals to make it stop, and it has not. But in the instant she touches Jesus, the faith that she has in His abilities makes her whole. And that's what Jesus stops and turns to her and says, "Your faith has made you well. Go in peace." So this woman has been living with the anxiety of her medical condition, of everything that's come along with it. And Jesus stops in the middle of something else to show her this attention. In the middle of him stopping, one of the father's servants comes to him and says, "Your daughter has died. Don't trouble the master." And Jesus says, No. Your daughter will be made well. She will be well. So Jesus, even in the middle of stopping to solve one situation, to take care of one person, to be present, can then turn and be present in another situation. That's the most difficult thing for us, I think, to understand, is we think our problems are not worth someone else's presence. And so the anxiety stays in our heads. It stays just within us, and it's hard for us to ever share that or get that to someone else. So in this story, we see this example of what presence in the middle of anxiety looks like. So for you guys, if we find people that will be present to us, we can actually get to the bottom. We can actually find relief and have people to go walk alongside our anxiety. So this week, we want to take this example of this woman and this father and think about what it would look like for us to bring our anxiety to someone of presence, which would be Jesus in our situation, in our case. So the first thing we want to practice this week is the idea of breathing. That you will stop and you will give yourself the space to think about what's really going on in your anxiety. The second thing we want to do is we want to practice this idea of handling our feelings, our anxiety, sadness, and not doing that on our own. Thinking about who could be a person who could help us handle these things. So it could be a therapist, it could be a friend, it could be one of the ministers here on staff, it could be your parents, it could be grandparents. But finding people so you're not having to handle that on your own. So the first thing is to breathe, to recognize your anxiety. The second thing is not to handle those stressors, emotions, and anxieties on your own. And the third thing is, we don't talk about this very often, but if you have ever felt a need to harm yourself, or a suicidal thought has come into your mind, that I am challenging you, praying that you will talk to somebody about it, that you will get out of your own head enough to talk to someone and say, I am really hurting. Like I am thinking about doing harm to myself. I'm thinking about killing myself. And I need to tell you that. I need to talk to you about that, because this is a serious thing that I'm going through. And this anxiety is overwhelming. I can only imagine what the woman had been feeling when she grasped at Jesus' clothes. Do you think she may have had a feeling of like harming herself or even killing herself because of how much pain she had lived through in all those years? What about the dad and his desperation? Maybe he had similar feelings, and some of you have had those feelings but not known how to reach out to someone. I pray that you will do that now. We have a lot of resources that we'd like to give you, and we're sending to your families if you have felt this way, ways that you can find the relief and the help that you need in those situations. So we want to practice breathing. We want to practice reaching out to people. And then if you have felt so desperate, to find the relief that you need. And those are the three things we're doing this week as far as our looking around, looking inside, and looking up. I want you to remember the way we're going to, these things as we do that. So for looking up, we're going to pause in the midst of our anxious thoughts to look up and seek God's encouragement through the Bible into talking with others and getting God's perspective. As we look inside, we're going to reflect on where God is working inside of us. And when we look around, we're going to take a good look at our own anxious world to determine when and how to ask for help when we feel that anxiety. So this week I want to pray that you do not feel like you are in an overwhelming or hopeless situation, that Jesus is a person of presence in your life, and there are people around you who want to be people of presence in your life, that they can sit and be present to the things that are going on with you. Make sure this week you breathe, that you find people that will listen to you, and that you make sure you get the relief for the anxieties that are pressing in on every side. I love you guys. I'm available to you. I'm willing to meet and talk about anything that's going on with you. I'd love for you to reach out this week about this scripture. So we're in Luke 8, verses 40 through 56. Read that with your family. Think through it as a devotional thought, and may you be blessed by releasing this anxiety this week. Have a great week.